Michael Malice opens the podcast by strongly pushing back against the popular narrative that America is necessarily in decline or collapse. He argues that catastrophe is not imminent so long as basic needs, such as access to food, are met, noting that true collapse involves fundamental breakdowns like food scarcity, which America currently does not face. Malice acknowledges challenges, but places America in a broader historical context, highlighting times where countries suffered far worse but endured. The discussion then shifts toward the concept of ascension rather than decline. Malice suggests that America's global presence and recognition of its values remain potent, particularly pointing to geopolitical movements where displays of American strength, as exemplified partially by the Trump administration, receive respect abroad even from critics. The revival of complex international negotiations, like tentative peace deals involving Middle Eastern nations, is cited as a sign of America's continuing influence. Domestically, a resurgence in patriotism is noted, contrasting with other countries where national pride is sometimes stigmatized. Malice identifies rising political polarization and siloization as one of the clearest markers of decline in American civil discourse. He describes an environment where genuine dialogue is increasingly scarce, foreshadowing potential escalations of conflict. He highlights current tensions between various states and the federal government, describing soft secession tactics as states withholding cooperation or tax revenues, exacerbating partisan divides. The situation sets the stage for brinksmanship that could spiral into more severe conflicts, though Malice expresses skepticism about a full-blown civil war. Instead, he anticipates ongoing conflict punctuated by tactical retreats or compromises. This fracturing of the political landscape, however, betrays the erosion of shared national identity and productive discourse, representing arguably America's most immediate worrisome internal trend. The conversation explores economic dynamics difficult for younger generations, emphasizing stagnating wages and rising living costs, particularly housing affordability. Malice and Tom Bilyeu discuss government deficit spending, inflation eroding purchasing power, and barriers to property ownership, which Malice emphasizes is a key asset and symbol of economic stability in America. Housing markets are examined with regional nuance, some cities like Austin experiencing price corrections, while others like New York and Los Angeles continue to see increases. The challenge of accessing homeownership feeds into broader economic anxieties, social alienation, and populist upswings, increasing desperation among millennials and Gen Z who find the traditional American dream receding. Economic mismanagement is deemed a critical driver of political instability and social unrest. Michael Malice offers a stark critique of universities, labeling them villains of our time due to their role in shaping future elites steeped in Marxist ideology. He describes the modern university as an indoctrination system fostering elitism, disconnecting degree holders from the broader society, and promoting a worldview intolerant of dissent or outside perspectives. This dynamic creates cultural schisms. Students return home after college alienated and unable to engage across ideological divides, nourishing societal polarization. Malice draws historical parallels to the infiltration of Marxist thought starting around the 1930s, connected with broader shifts in media and culture, and laments the lack of humility seen in the current elite, who view themselves as rightful rulers without respect for non-college educated citizens. Though acknowledging the rising energy on the progressive left, especially the DSA and figures like AOC, Malice sees the political parties as malleable coalitions rather than monoliths carved in stone. He points to the moderating corporate hack wings of both parties, noting that political actors often pivot ideologically to maintain power. The conversation explores the oscillation between moderate and populist candidates, with enthusiasm and turnout often favoring the latter, despite common wisdom favoring moderates as more electable. This electoral pattern occurs on both sides. Malice also highlights ways corporate interests act as centripetal forces that temper extreme ideological shifts, underscoring the complexity of political coalitions beyond simplistic left-right divides. A crucial segment addresses the rising tide of anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories centered on Jewish people, which Malice identifies as a perilous indicator of societal dysfunction and crisis. He contextualizes this trend historically, likening it to past pogroms and the scapegoating patterns that often presage severe instability or collapse. Malice stresses the logical inconsistency and deep harm of conspiratorial thinking that attributes societal problems monolithically to Jewish influence. He warns that this toxic impulse is a mile marker on the road to severe societal decay and urges awareness of its significance. The conversation highlights how political factions weaponize these narratives for power struggles, adding a layer of dangerous divisiveness to an already fracturing country. Malice and Bilyeu turn to the failure of good faith debate as ideological actors increasingly use language as a manipulation tool, not a means of genuine communication. The example of contentious trans debates illustrates how discussions have devolved into rigid dogma where costs and trade-offs are denied or ignored, undermining constructive discourse. This erosion of dialogue fuels tribalism and deepens divides, leaving little room for nuanced perspectives or compromise. Malice highlights how attempts to discuss complex, contentious issues are thwarted by uncompromising ideologies determined to dominate conversations rather than engage. This trend pushes society toward more extreme polarization and conflict, squeezing out moderation and mutual understanding. Moving from diagnoses to prognosis, Malice outlines several futurist scenarios America might face. He largely rejects the idea of a classic civil war on the 1860s scale, disbelieving that either current friendly or antagonistic factions have the military capacity or will to engage in prolonged conflict. Instead, he sees more likely outcomes akin to the French Revolution, intermittent violence leading to the rise of authoritarian leadership, or Argentina's long-term economic decline driven by bad fiscal policies and populism. Underlying all these is the economy. If unresolved, it could catalyze serious upheaval, political violence, and authoritarian tendencies. Malice stresses the importance of taking evasive action preemptively to alter the trajectory, warning that failing to fix systemic economic problems will institutionalize instability and degradation. An extended dialogue centers on artificial intelligence and technological automation as major future disruptors. Malice worries about the displacement of middle-aged and lower-skilled workers by AI-driven systems, resulting in difficult socioeconomic challenges. Even as AI promises efficiency and technological advances, it creates new layers of economic strain, boredom, and identity crises for many displaced people. They discuss the potential for AI-powered algorithmic bubbles that tailor information feeds to reinforce one's worldview, exacerbating tribalism and societal fragmentation. Virtual worlds and augmented realities emerge as possible post-economic refuges, though he acknowledges their potential dystopian aspects if they alienate people from genuine human engagement or enforce rigid technological dependence. The podcast delves into the psychological role of tribal affiliation for people navigating increasingly fractured societies. Malice explains how belonging to ideological tribes provides emotional safety and intellectual shortcuts, helping individuals handle complex realities by adopting group heuristics for thinking and behavior. However, this tribalism comes at the cost of openness to disconfirming evidence and outsiders. Malice recognizes the dangers of such polarization, but understands the human need for meaningful community and identity. The conversation reflects on moderates' vulnerability and the risks they face amid growing extremism and partisanship. Discussing media narratives, conspiracy theories, and information warfare, Malice and Bilyeu recognize that many powerful entities historically coordinate influence campaigns. Malice argues for a scientific, first principles approach to parsing information, questioning assumptions, evaluating falsifiability, and avoiding reasoning backward from fixed conclusions. They contrast conspiracy theories with legitimate historical conspiratorial events, urging listeners to assess claims critically rather than adopt simplistic narratives. The discussion includes reflections on public figures and misinformation, emphasizing the importance of intellectual rigor and skepticism in a heavily manipulated media environment.